And welcome to College Football Now, our weekly live college football show. I'm Brant Parsons. With me, as always, Matt Murschel. And the college football season is here. We can say it finally. Division 1A FBS, if you'll get started tomorrow night, Thursday night. UCF kicks off at 6 p.m. That kind of starts everything rolling. We did have football last weekend, Montana and North Dakota State. A great little teaser there of what the football season could bring. If every game is as good as that one, we're in for a fun ride.
Yeah, we are. I mean, it was just just enough to give you an appetizer, getting ready for the season, get yourself ready for what's going to come up. I'm happy. I don't know about you. I mean, it seemed like this off season was very long. One of those times where, we had so much going on outside of the gridiron, coaches' movements. We had all sorts of things with coaches getting in trouble, players, all that kind of stuff. So I'm excited to get the games actually kicked off, and let's get things moving.
All right, and it's nice to be talking about the games because so much of the offseason is the things off the field. But some of the big question marks holding in here, the topic everybody's talking about are the two quarterback situations at schools, whether or not they're going to play two quarterbacks, as they've announced, at least in Florida, to start the season. Jim McElwain has said he's going to play both Will Grier and Trajan Harris. Then you have situations like Ohio State where you have two great quarterbacks where Coach Urban Meyer has to pick between the two. He hasn't announced yet who he's going to start. He says whoever goes out on the first snap. Then you have the thing in Michigan. Jim Harbaugh won't admit. Alabama won't admit. The first question is, does it matter that they're not announcing the starter to us? Is this just us, our desire to want to know these things? They don't really have to tell us who's starting, right? No,
they really don't. And, to be honest with you, the most popular quarterback this week has been or, because as you know, on depth charts, it's just listing a name and then or and listing another name. It doesn't really matter, honestly. I think for the first game for most of these teams, in Florida's case, taking on New Mexico State, it's just about getting these guys out there and getting them opportunities to play. Like Jim McElwain said, I'm going to play both these guys. I think we'll see them in different situations. I think he wants to decide eventually down the road whether he'll have a full-time starter named. I think the two-quarterback system works fine for a game or two. Really doesn't do well the whole system, the whole season long. Although I guess you can argue in Florida's case back in 2006, Chris Leak and Tim Tebow came into different situations, helped that team lead to a national championship. But honestly, it really doesn't matter. Eventually down the road, they're going to pick somebody. I think in Ohio State's case, for instance, I think Urban Meyer's going to wait till about 5 minutes before kickoff before he trots his starting quarterback out there. And it's a little bit of gamesmanship as well, too. I think you want to give the opposing defensive coordinator something to think about, something extra to prepare about. If they spend 20 extra minutes preparing for Cardell Jones and JT Barrett, then I think they're doing their job. So again, the first game, you're just kind of getting the kinks out. We'll probably see down the road the next couple of games, you'll see starters actually be named.
Now, in this more modern era of college football, I remember when Steve Spurrier first was dealing with two quarterbacks at Florida, it was like breaking news. It works in some situations. I don't think it works at Ohio State because JT Barrett, Cardell Jones, probably too much alike. But in a situation like Florida, where you have two different kinds of quarterbacks, can you get away with a two-quarterback system throughout the year? You don't have an outright guy that looks like he's the starter. You have does that work at this college level? Can you have situational QBs?
I think you can have situational quarterbacks. I don't think it works well because here's the problem with that, is you want your quarterback to get some sort of rhythm going. You want them to be able to go out there and to kind of get in sync with their wide receivers. If you're having a situation where a guy comes out and plays one series of downs and then the other guy drops out and plays the other series of downs, I think that doesn't work, because I think what happens eventually is the players around them are kind of like, okay, well, who's it going to be this time? What if someone gets hot? Do you want to continue to ride that guy and have him play the entire second half? So I think in certain situations it works. As we all remember with Tim Tebow, he would come in during that 2006 season. He would come in the ever famous, the leap touchdown throw. That was kind of his signature move really that season. But I don't necessarily know if these guys have that kind of ability. Harris has a lot more mobility. He's the kind of player that can scramble outside the pocket. If Florida's offensive line struggles, if Will Grier comes out there who's more of a pocket passer and he can't seem to get time to find his receivers because he's being chased out of the pocket, then maybe you move with Harris a little bit to kind of open things up a little. But again, I think it's fine early on. It's fine for maybe a certain situation here and there in games. But I don't necessarily think you want to go the whole season that way.
I mean, it's interesting to follow. You have the guys like Nick Saban, Jim Harbaugh, who's notoriously cranky, Urban Meyer playing it by close to the vest. Then you have Jimbo Fisher, who came out just this week and said, well, it's going to be Everett Golson as a starter after going through the camp. It really doesn't matter, though. It doesn't matter who starts. If you come out and Cardell Jones plays the first play and JT Barrett plays the whole first half except for that first play. Cardale Jones is a star. So it's just, I think we spent a little too much time on it, but we just spent time on it because it's interesting and it's fun to watch the coaches kind of finagle it into their favor.
Yeah, and I think also, too, it really does, it's all about consistency. If you send a guy out there, and let's say in Ohio State's case, they send JT Barrett out there and he struggles a little bit. Let's say the offense isn't moving, they're not scoring points. Well, then maybe you throw Cardale Jones out there for a series just to see if he can kind of get the offense going. If the offense gets a spark and maybe he's able to do some things, then maybe stick with him for a while. So, that's the thing Urban Meyer has, that everyone's been talking about this offseason. He has a great luxury to go out there with two guys and really kind of see which one fits the bill best. Same thing with Jim McElwain. He wants to see which guy feels the best, which one gets the offense moving and get some points scored on the board.
Another favorite topic heading into the season, coaches on the hot seat, and we've picked out a couple. One in the ACC, Mike London in Virginia, a guy that's been there. This is his 6th season, 23-37. You wonder, how do you get a 6th season when you're 23 and 37? Talk about him being on the hot seat. I think his seat may be the hottest of them all at this point.
Well, I would have argued Tim Beckman at Illinois would have been the hottest going into the season, but then he, inexplicably loses his job last Friday because of the internal investigation. So Mike London really is the next man up, really think about it. I think it's just because Virginia had one successful season. A lot of schools want to invest in their coach. They'll sign them to a 3, 4, 5-year contract, and sometimes that just doesn't work out, and I think in this situation, things have been tough. I mean, again, the schedule doesn't help them this year. They open up against UCLA. That's going to be a really tough game for them to start out with. And then you get into the actual ACC schedule. You get into the Coastal Division where you're going to have to face teams like the Virginia Techs, Georgia Techs, Dukes, those kind of things. Those are always going to be tough to compete against. But eventually down the road, if you don't win it, it does come back to winning and keeping your program kind of on the level. If you don't win, they'll come up and catch you.
And we have Virginia very low in our countdown, so we're expecting him to not have a job.
Yeah, and I think he probably will be done at the end of this year.
We talk about how many years he's had a chance. A guy that hasn't had that many years is on the hot seat over in Tampa. Willie Taggart at USF, just his 3rd year, 6-18 through the first 2 years. That's not good. That's not going to get it done at USF. Is he on his last chance to make something happen with that Bulls team?
Well, I think so. Just only in the idea that maybe they made some big off-season changes. He came in and he really kind of tweaked over the offense. He's now going with a more up-tempo offense. He really wants to see things happen. I think he's obviously doing the same thing defensively as well. He hired a new defensive coordinator, Tom Allen. They're going with a 4-2-5 scheme that's supposed to allow them to kind of really rely more on their outside speed, more on their athleticism, because he knows they're going to have to compete against a lot of these spread offenses. So he's made some big changes. They got a new quarterback, Quentin Flowers, who played a little bit last year. He's going to start the season. I think USF will be improved from last year. I just don't know how much that's going to be, whether that's going to be the next step is going to be 6 wins, whatever it's going to take. But again, you have to keep, as long as you show some progress, and I think if they get to that point, he might survive one more season.
Talk about after a certain amount of time, there's no tenure in college football, but if you're out of school for a certain amount of time, you would expect a little bit of respect on that. The other guy we have on our list is entering his 17th season at Iowa, Kirk Ferentz, 115-85. But if he's not sitting well on his seat at Iowa, he's got to see some improvement up there, or he could be done.
Yeah, he's a guy who, just imagine, I think it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, he was really a hot candidate coach. He was a guy that really could have probably moved on to either another program or maybe gone to the NFL. His name was being mentioned several times over. But then in the last 5 years, Iowa's really struggled, especially in the Big Ten. And that's something, when you look at that conference, when you're seeing schools like Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Wisconsin, Nebraska, when all those schools are starting to elevate their performance and Iowa's not finding their way there as well, I think that's when people start questioning. He was signed to a big contract, a big long-term deal as well. So I think Iowa fans are hoping that maybe he can kind of get things rectified, get them maybe in contention for a Big Ten championship.
And the last guy we have on the hot seat down in Coral Gables, Al Golden at Miami, entering in his 5th season, 28-22. I don't think the seat is as hot as maybe other people do because they owe him a lot of money, and Miami doesn't like to pay coaches to not coach there. He's got a great recruiting class coming in 2016. He's got great recruits already lining up for 2017. He's brought in great recruits before, but Now it's a time for this is how his team. Every guy that's on his team now was recruited by him, and he's got to be able to turn these great recruits into success for the Hurricanes.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why he's kind of found himself on the hot seat a little bit. I think people expect more from this team. I mean, they expect them to be competing. You know, we're talking about a program that during the early 2000s, you know, was consistently winning national championships, it seemed like, and had a really good string of you know, good coaches and good performances, top athletes. You just haven't seen that the last couple of years. Listen, I think Al Golden's done an amazing job considering. He came into that program, walks into a situation where you've got an NCAA investigation going on. The school decides to do the self-imposed bowl bans for a couple of years. That's always tough. And he recruited really well during that time period. So now he recruits again, and then, you know, he gets some of these guys in there. So if they don't show some winning, if they don't show that they can actually compete, I think you're going to see some of these big name alumni, the guys like the Michael Irvins, the guys like the Warren Sapp, guys who normally appear on campus, you know, to promote, you know, help the program. If they don't start showing up, I think that's when all of a sudden, you know, you start to believe that you're in trouble.
Well, each week we're going to make picks. We'll do our national picks at the end of the show. We'll make state picks. This week, state picks are pretty much a given. So instead of, you know, spending the time how we're both picking UCF to beat FIU. But let's look at these games. UCF opens the season Thursday night, 6 o'clock at home against FIU. The first time they played since 2013. They didn't play last year. Back 2011, the first time they played, FIU beat UCF. This is a young UCF team. I looked it up. They have 9 seniors coming back this year off a team last year that won a share of the conference title. This is a transition year for them. They've got a schedule that you know, you would look at and you think this is a bowl-bound team. This is a team that should battle in the American. But they get FIU to come in. This is really going to be a game where they get a chance to work out the kinks. I looked at 15 catches came back on wide receiver. This offense, Justin Holman had a great year passing it last year. But this year they're going to have to go back to running, which they didn't do a great job last year. But this will be the chance to see what Brent Key can do as offensive coordinator, what's going on at UCF. And they get it against an opponent like FIU, which on paper should be an easy work out the kinks kind of game.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, I mean, you know, FIU is 1-4 in season openers the past 5 years. They haven't had very much success. I think if you mentioned, you talk about seniors, and you know, this UCF offense has 15 underclassmen. You know, so I mean, there's a lot of youth there, and I think eventually that'll help out down the road. I think you'll get to see some of that athleticism and some of that talent, especially at the wide receiver position. But I'm really looking forward to seeing what Brett Key can really do, what he can kind of get this offense to do. You know, Justin Holman needs to make that transition, needs that next step, you know, show what he can do offensively as well. But one of the things I think people really want to pay attention to is the defense. I think defense for UCF is going to be something that they need to keep an eye on and see how they can handle things. You know, FIU ran the ball about 60% of the time last year. I think they were like I looked up there, like 1 in 15 when they rushed for less than 100 yards. So that's going to be the key up front, is if they can stop, you know, FIU's running game, if they can contain that as well, keep them down, I think that'll help help their young secondary, because that's some of the question marks right there, is, you know, stopping the passing game, making sure they don't give up the big plays. If they can do that and avoid turnovers, I think UCF should roll in this game very easily. And
you talk about FIU, it's kind of a good matchup for them because they did lose the entire secondary. All 4 starters of the secondary are gone, either in the NFL, trying to be in the NFL. FIU run strength, if you want to call it a strength, a run-oriented offense. UCF's defense, at least starting the year, they're going to be tough against the run. So again, when we look at this game, we don't expect FIU to win. I think we'd be more shocked if it was a close game. But what does UCF need to get out of this before they head out west to play Stanford in this FIU game?
Well, they need to first and foremost, they need to come out of this game healthy. You don't want to see any major injuries. You also always see some of these guys like William Stanbeck, you know, guys who really, you know, didn't have, you know, were kind of struggled a little bit maybe in the offseason and spring. We're kind of limited by injuries. You want to see them come out and have a good start to the season. You want to see what they can do as well. Again, you want to see some of we talked about your young wide receivers. You want to see them be able to go out and really make some plays as well. And then I think defensively, you want to maybe see some of the young guys step up and what they can do, maybe show some potential there as well. Come out with a clean game, avoid turnovers, create turnovers. I mean, you know, again, we talked about FIU having some issues. You know, the quarterback situation, Alex McGew, he had 10 interceptions and he had 10 fumbles last year. So again, a guy who turns the ball over. It'd be something they need to watch.
The other, one of the other games in the state to watch Saturday, Florida opens the season against New Mexico State, and a line from the Florida press notes, which I thought was interesting. They said, coming off a successful but tumultuous year. if last year is considered a success in Florida, where have we fallen to? Head coach Jim McElwain comes in. The Gators, the second most winningest team in season openers right now, 25 straight. Nebraska has 29. Florida is not going to lose this game. I can already see the headlines in our paper the next day. Oh, the offense is back because they're going to blow New Mexico State out. But this is, again, the first chance we're going to see it. Jim McElwain coming in. They revamped the entire coaching staff except for one. The offensive line coach is the only one that came back, a very new and young offensive line. They're going to look great against New Mexico State. I mean, this Florida team, just like last year against Eastern Michigan, they're going to look like they're ready to compete in the SEC, but this should be a cakewalk, but it'll still be interesting to just kind of see what kind of changes McElwain might bring in for this offense.
Yeah, this is a perfect game for Florida. I mean, you want to open up the season. You want to give young guys opportunities to play. You talked about it earlier. You've got two quarterbacks, in Treon Harris and Will Greer. Harris has had some experience starting some games last year. Greer doesn't. So Greer's going to need to really kind of get his legs under him so he can really kind of see what he can do as well. This gives the offense some opportunities to try some different things as well. See what guys maybe will be playmakers and won't be able to do that. I also want to look at the offensive line. This offensive line is really a concern. They are razor thin in depth-wise. They've already got some little injuries here. Martez Ivy, there was some talk that he might start this game because of injury. By not having that strong offensive line, you want to make sure you avoid those kind of injuries. I think defensively, this defense is going to be just as good as they were the last couple of years. A lot of young talent there. We're hearing Antonio Morrison's going to be back in linebacker after suffering a knee injury, during this offseason. Wasn't even supposed to be back this soon. He's going to play as well. Vernon Hargraves in the secondary. I think Florida's secondary is probably one of the best in the SEC. So again, I think those are the pieces you want to see. You want to get these guys out there. You want to put some points up. I don't think it matters how many points you put up as long as you win the game and as long as you come out healthy.
Yeah, Florida played New Mexico State to open the 1994 season. They scored 70 points. I don't see them doing that on Saturday, but I also don't see New Mexico State scoring 21 points like they did in 94 against this defense. This Florida defense is going to be strong. What I'm looking for in this game is not just the two quarterbacks, but we keep hearing about all the route tree, if you will, and the offense having more choices, receivers having more things they can do. I want to see an offense that doesn't put me to sleep, and that's what the offense. We heard it last year. They were going to come in and revamp the offense, and it was a snooze fest all season long. I want to see some dynamics on this offense. I don't care who's quarterback. I want to see receivers making plays. I want to see running backs making plays. Kelvin Taylor, it's time for him to start making plays. They'll do it against New Mexico State, but I want to see in the context that they do it against New Mexico State and how it looks and how they run stuff.
Well, I agree with you somewhat, but I tell you what, the thing this whole season that I'm most eager to watch is the development at quarterback, because I think that's something that Florida hasn't had since Urban Meyer was here, was with the program, because they just haven't had the kind of development you want to see out of your quarterback. I think that was one of the things that hurt Jeff Driscoll. I don't think he was really, I don't think they spent time with him enough to really develop into a quarterback. That's something that Jim McElwain has supposedly have done really well, at Colorado State, and I think it's something they need to do with these, whether it's Will Greer, whether it's Treon Harris. We need to see development. We need to see them take that next step. We know they can play college football. We need to see if they can play at the next level.
Speaking of quarterbacks, Florida State opens up their season on Saturday night at home against North Texas. Texas State. And again, we're not picking whichever Texas team they're playing to beat them. We both agree Florida State's going to win this game. A big question mark out of the way. I don't know if it's a huge question mark. I think we saw this, but Jimbo Fisher names Everett Golson his starter at quarterback. Jameis Winston off to the NFL. We looked at this Florida State team. You and I know we had this conversation after the season ended, and they've got talent at the skill positions. They've got talent at running back. They've got some receivers still there that are good. But who's going to be the quarterback? Well, in pops Everett Golson. He wins the job. Sean McGuire is going to be the backup. That's the big Florida State question. Now they get to go out in the same kind of thing as Florida with New Mexico State. They get to roll up against an opponent, but we get to see what the offense may look like with Everett Golson. I think it'll look a little different than it did with Jameis.
Yeah, I think so. One of the things that hurt Everett Golson during his time, especially last year at Notre Dame, was he turned the ball over. He was really turnover prone. I think part of that stemmed on the idea that he felt like he had to carry the offense. Notre Dame really didn't have a dominant running game. They didn't have a 1,000-yard rusher. Golson won't have that problem this year. He'll have a guy as Delvin Cook behind him who had over 1,000 yards last year, should be back and rested. He'll also have Mario Penders. I think he'll have the opportunity to be able to turn around and hand the ball off and let those guys do what they need to do as well. Offensive line, untested, a little young. I think that's going to be something that'll be a little bit of concern. But Golson provides them with some mobility. That should help out as well. I think the big thing is Jimbo Fisher doesn't need Everett Golson to carry this team to wins. I think what he wants them to do is just control the game. Make sure you don't make mistakes. Make sure that you get the ball to those talented wide receivers. Make sure you get the ball to the players that need to be there. And then rely on your defense as well. Because, again, against a team like Texas State, Texas State is 0-19 all-time against Power 5 teams. So I don't think there's going to be too much of a threat there as well. So I think this gives you an opportunity to kind of see some things. I wouldn't be surprised, and I'll say this too, is that Sean McGuire doesn't see some action in this game as well.
Well, you better see some action, because if Sean McGuire doesn't play, that means this game's a lot closer than it should be. We talked about UCF, and to them, 8 or 9 wins is probably a successful season. We talked about Florida Gators, 7 or 8 wins may be a successful season with their schedule. Those are numbers. If that happens at Florida State under Jimbo Fisher, we're going to have some panic going on in Tallahassee. When you look at this team, and you know that Everett Golson, and we're going to see them play against Texas State, do they have the parts, and what parts are you looking to say, well, I was right, they are an ACC contender? Is it the defense? Is it what we've talked about with Everett Golson? Where are we looking against Texas State to kind of see some of the strengths heading into this year?
Well, I think what I'm looking for is the defense. I think they lost so much talent this offseason to the NFL. It was bound to happen when you have as much as they had the last couple of years. I want to see how the defensive line works. I want to see how the linebackers play. I want to see if they're able to create turnovers. Texas State does not turn the ball over a lot, especially fumble-wise. They only fumbled the ball 5 times last year. The year before that, they only did 6 times. So I want to see if that young defense can be aggressive. Can they strip the ball out? Can the secondary take advantage of it and make interceptions? Those are the things I think that Florida State needs to show me. They need to show me they can take advantage of this. Because, but listen, when they move forward, when they're playing teams like Clemson, like Louisville, when you play those kind of down the road, you're going to have to be able to be on top of your game, because you're going to play a different level. You're going to play against a guy like Deshaun Watson, who's going to be able to take advantage of that. And if you want to win the ACC again, you're going to have to do it with the defense.
Before we get into our weekly picks, we took a couple questions off of Twitter, so we're going to deal with those now. The first question, this is one that you're built to answer. Which directional Michigan school has the best shot at upsetting their opponent this weekend? You have Western Michigan hosting Michigan State, Central Michigan hosting Oklahoma State, and Eastern Michigan hosting Old Dominion. I don't think they were worried about Eastern, but when you look at Western or Central, do either of them have a chance at home against a Power 5 school?
I don't think they have a chance. I think that Western, of the two you mentioned, is probably going to give the biggest fight. I think they'll probably be really good against a team like Michigan State. It's a rare Friday night game. Michigan State actually making the trip over to Kalamazoo. I think Western coach P.J. Fleck said it's the biggest thing to happen to the city since the Simon and Garfunkel concert in 1970, and he wasn't even born then. So again, this is going to be a big showdown. I think Western will give them a fight early on, but I think Michigan State's too good of a team. I think really, honestly, Eastern is probably the best opportunity against an Old Dominion team, although I'm not sure if that's, if any of these teams are coming away with wins. But I'm interested to see what Western Michigan does and how they perform against Michigan State.
I think the more shocking thing going into this is Western, Central, and Eastern all starting off at home. How many? These are schools that have made a habit of going out and picking up a paycheck playing somewhere else. They all start at home. 2 of them get Power 5s at home. I think that's news. I bet it hasn't happened, and if it hasn't happened in a long time.
Well, Mark D'Antonio, the Michigan State coach, said during the Big Ten teleconference that they're excited to do this, and the reason they agreed to do this was to help kind of pump some give them an economic boost for the city of Kalamazoo. So I think if more Power 5 teams are willing to do that, I think, as you talked about, these little towns that host some of these games, it really does give them a boost with travel, with hotels, and with tourism. So again, if you're just trying to help out a state school and a state team or in a state town, that's the way to do it.
The other question came from LSU Football, one of the sites I enjoy because they do TV listings as good as we do. Any theories on why DirecTV and SEC Network have trouble communicating? Apparently, it's tough to get the SEC alternative games listed and such on that.
I don't have a theory on that. The television, honestly, how DirecTV works and how Dish TV and all those channels work is a mystery to me. But I do know that those are things that you're seeing more and more of, these networks expanding their coverage, allowing more games to be on. They need to do that more often because, again, there's so many opportunities there. The only thing I can suggest is watch it online.
SEC, Big Ten, Pac-12, they all have multiple channels associated with their network. There'll be there'll be 2 SEC games on at the same time on an SEC network. So it's interesting to follow that. A team, we're going to do the big game picks, but what I wanted to get a pick from you was a team that could shock this weekend, or a surprise team. I don't want to call it upset of the week because that's kind of cliche, but a team that when you look at the schedule and you think, they're not favored, but I think they have a shot to win this game.
Well, I'm going to my first one will be North Carolina beating South Carolina Thursday night. I think North Carolina is a 2-point underdog in this game, and I know it's not much of a stretch, but when you look at this game, I just think North Carolina returns 10 offensive starters. They put up a ton of points last year. Defense, they couldn't stop anybody. South Carolina was in the same sort of boat. They couldn't stop anybody. We all remember they were a 10-point favorite against Texas A&M to open the season last year, and A&M came in and rolled over them, really kind of embarrassed them, and started the whole discussion on whether Spurrier was going to be back or not. I think North Carolina can win this game. It's in a neutral site. It's in Charlotte at Bank of America Stadium. I like North Carolina. It's not so much of an upset like you mentioned, but it is kind of a big deal. To start off the season with a win against an SEC team would be huge.
Yeah, I mean, and if you want to talk conferences, ACC will love to hang that one on their hat. I was all set to pick Utah to beat Michigan. I don't follow point spreads, and you advised me that Utah's the favorite. So
yeah.
Utah beating Michigan doesn't even qualify for this. But the other one, this is just out on a limb here, and I think Northwestern will give Stanford a game. And my basis for this, there's some X's and O's. Pat Fitzgerald and Nick Van Hoos on defense is good, and Christian Jones coming back on offense. But this is going to be a 9 a.m. kickoff for the Stanford team in Evanston. So back home, and their bodies are going to be at 9 a.m. Pacific time. We're asking Stanford to start a game at 9 in the morning. It'll be 11 in the morning local time, Chicago, 12 o'clock here. And I see that, and I think that can't be good. So I'm going to give Northwestern an edge simply based on when they start that game.
I'm sure there are a lot of Northwestern fans in our office right now who just laid out a big cheer in the newsroom. So I think they'll probably agree with you.
So I'm not putting any money on that. Okay. And I don't follow spread, so I don't know what the.
I'm going to throw in a bonus one. I know
bonus. So you like bonus?
Arizona State is an underdog, if you can believe that, to Texas A&M on a neutral site this weekend. I think Arizona State wins this game. Arizona State's won 10 games the last 2 seasons. I think Todd Graham knows how to win these games. I think A&M struggled the last 2 years. I know they came in with a big fury thanks to Johnny Manziel and everything, but they've struggled the last couple of years. I think Arizona State wins this game.
Throughout the season, you'll be doing a Heisman Trophy update, a watch each week. We've kind of talked about plenty leading up Heisman Trophy candidates, but going into this week, a player to watch that may be someone down the line and we'll be watching for a Heisman, but who are you looking most forward to seeing this weekend and seeing how they do?
Well, this is what I'm looking at. I know everyone wants to talk about Ohio State quarterbacks. Everyone wants to talk about the 2 guys. I think they're the 2 guys to watch. Those are the 2 guys that I'm really interested in. Whether it's J.T. Barrett or whether it's Cardell Jones, I think one of those 2 guys is going to step up and have a big game. Or maybe both of them, to be honest with you. I think whoever does that, whoever helps that team get the win, I think that will eventually give them the foothold maybe going into the Heisman race. Now, again, it depends on what happens with Trayvon Boykin up against Minnesota, with TCU and Minnesota Thursday night. If he goes nuts and throws for 500, 600 yards, that'll change. But I'm really interested in this quarterback battle. I want to see who wins it, who moves forward. Or does Urban Meyer decide I'm going to go with 2 guys and play them? If that's the case, that really does kind of hurt their Heisman chances. You can't go with the 2 quarterback system. Then I would look for Ezekiel Elliott.
A player to watch for me in that game, I'm going to give a bonus one, is Braxton Miller. And just to see how his transition to wide receiver has gone. And he's going to be asked to do even more because of suspension. So he's going to be thrown into the fire. But my guy I'm watching this weekend, quarterback for Baylor, Seth Russell. And listen, we know about Art Briles' offense. We know what it can do. We know what their schedule is. But he's still stepping in, and it's going to be interesting to see. Not an easy start. They go on the road to play SMU. I realize it's not playing a ranked opponent on the road, but they're getting a little bit out of their comfort zone. But I want to see how he comes out and if he's going to be strong enough to lead this Baylor team, which seems to be loaded everywhere. Just have, like a lot of teams, have that question at quarterback. Can Seth Russell come in and just keep the ball rolling for Baylor? That's who I want to see.
And I think that's big for them because if they struggle against SMU, I think that doesn't hurt their case. That hurts their case going forward with the college football playoff.
You ready to make picks?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
Right. National picks. We might keep track of these. We might not. It just depends on how we do.
Remember, these aren't for gambling purposes.
No gambling purposes, because I don't even know what lines are. Thursday night, it kicks off a game I'm really looking forward to after the UCF game. Number 2 TCU visits Minnesota. And again, you talked about it on Baylor, we're talking about TCU. This is a team that feels it has something to prove from last year by being left out of the college football playoff, but also has something to play for this year. This is a talented team. This is a team with a good offense, a good defense. But Minnesota's not the Minnesota of Minnesota's past. This will not be, it shouldn't be a cakewalk for the Horned Frogs.
Only way I think that Minnesota wins this game is if somehow miraculously there's about 10 inches or 12 inches of snow on the ground when TCU steps on the field, which isn't going to happen. I think TCU puts up a lot of points in this game. I think they struggle early, like a lot of teams this weekend when they get that first quarter under their belt. But I like what Traylon Boykin's doing. I think he's going to put up a lot of points. I think TCU, the only weakness they really have is they don't return a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball. So I think they're going to have to put up a bunch of points. I think Minnesota will give them a good game early on. I just think eventually there's too much speed, too much athleticism for TCU.
The key for the Golden Gophers on offense is to be good on defense because they need to keep this game close. Minnesota is not a team with an offense that can come back. Once they're down 2 touchdowns, they're done. But if they can stay in this game, they can grind it out. I think this game will be closer than people might predict. But I am picking TCU in this one. But I think this one's going to be fun to watch. Arizona State, Texas A&M, they play Houston on Saturday night. It's on ESPN. You've already kind of hinted at yours. You've told us yours. Possibly Arizona State, at least as an upset pick to watch. Mm-hmm. You're going to pick them straight up to win this game?
Yeah, I think they do. Nothing against Texas A&M. I think A&M's going to have a good offense. I think they're going to put some points on. I just haven't been impressed the last couple of years. I think A&M lost 5 of their last 6 games last year. I mean, they've struggled. I think Kyle Allen will step in at quarter, did like he did last year, step in and really start making some plays. I think defense is going to be an issue. John Chavis comes in as the new defensive coordinator. Can he turn them around? Can they get, can the defense really shut them down? I like Arizona State. I know this game is being played in Houston, so I know that Texas A&M will have a big fan base with them. But I think Arizona State's going to be really good. I think they're probably going to give them a good battle. It'll be close, but I think they win the game.
I got to tell you, I'm shocked that the A&M's a favorite in this game because I was looking at this. Oh, this is Arizona State. I mean, just hands down. I'm a big believer in the Pac-12, especially the top teams in the Pac-12. I think Arizona State is one of those. I think they're going to come in this game and really kind of open some eyes because these are the games that these teams from the West have to come in and open some eyes. I think Arizona State's going to win this one, and they're going to look good doing it. Saturday afternoon, a game that is on CBS in Atlanta. Louisville opens up against number 6 Auburn. And I talked with some Auburn folks today, one Auburn folk, and I said, I think this is a closer game. And no. Auburn is going to easily pull this one off. Louisville, they do have a lot of bodies to replace. They sent a lot to the NFL. Can they compete with the Tigers, though, in this one?
I don't think so. I mean, maybe early on they'll be. Again, there's some gamemanship here. I know Bobby Petrino is not going to reveal who his quarterback is going to be until probably they kick off as well. I like Auburn. I'm interested in seeing Will Muschamp take over that defense. I want to see if they can improve on that. We're going to see a different Auburn offense. I mean, I think people are used to the Nick Marshall, used to the Cam Newton. I think Jeremy Johnson's a guy who could really put up a lot, could throw the ball deep, can make some good throws that they need to make. I think if defensively if they shut down Louisville, this could be a blowout.
Yeah, I'm going to pick Auburn in this game, and I'm with you. I think Will Muschamp is going to make a difference here. Terrible head coach in Florida, or whatever you want to call him, but he knows how to coach defense, and he knows how to get a defensive play well. Auburn beats Louisville in that opener. Monday Night Football, Labor Day, number 1 Ohio State. This game has been circled on a lot of calendars for a long time. They visit Blacksburg. They open up against Virginia Tech, the only team to beat them last year. In fact, when Virginia Tech beat Ohio State last year, it looked like Ohio State was done. They were going to, can they win 8 games? Can they at least even make it to a bowl? Of course, we know what happened. They go to Blacksburg. They play a Virginia Tech team at night, Monday night, Labor Day, 4 players suspended. Some people are thinking this could be a tough game for Ohio State.
Maybe early on. Again, Urban Meyer has hinted at that, but I'm not sure. I think this Ohio State team has the pieces. Listen, they talked about this before. This was actually supposed to be the year that they felt like Ohio State could win the national championship. They just did everything right last year. Everything kind of fitted perfectly. Talked to some people who thought really that Virginia Tech loss really kind of was the catalyst for Ohio State getting to the national championship game because they used that, and they used that to focus and to move forward from it. So I think Ohio State and Urban Meyer have been in this situation before. He's obviously coached teams that have struggled or have come off a national championship season. So I like Ohio State in this game. I think Ezekiel Elliott will have a big game up front on running the ball as well. And I think we'll finally get the answer to who's going to be quarterback at Ohio State.
If Ohio State hadn't lost Virginia Tech last year, and this was just Ohio State opening up at Virginia Tech on a Monday night and they were number 1 team, I may think, Virginia Tech may have a problem, but Ohio State knows all about Virginia Tech. And every one of those places, you talk about how this was supposed to be the year, barely anybody left that Ohio State program. They didn't graduate that many stars. They didn't send a lot of people to the NFL. They all came back because they were all sophomores. This was the year that was going to be Ohio State's year. They all know what it's like to lose to Virginia Tech. It's not going to happen. They won't let it happen. I think this game gets out of hand early. Even with the suspensions, I think Ohio State wins this pretty handily. That's what I'm going with on that.
Yeah, I think Ohio State again is going to have that. I think they'll have a stretch where they'll probably be pretty impressive before they really hit kind of the first big hurdle. I know it's hard to win at Blacksburg at night, but again, I don't think the offense for Virginia Tech has enough to really score enough points to beat Ohio State.
And the final game we're going to pick, the game of the week, the only game involving top 25 teams playing each other. Number 20, Wisconsin. Number 3, Alabama in Arlington, Saturday night on ABC. We don't know who's going to be the quarterback for Alabama. Nick Saban's not going to tell us. Wisconsin, talk about a team with a chip on his shoulder. When they went out in the Big Ten title game to Ohio State, lost 59-0, came back, won a big bowl game. Can they compete with Alabama?
I think they can. I think this game's going to be very close. I mean, I know Alabama has a history of, beating up on teams in these neutral site openers, but I think this game's going to be a lot closer than people think. I think, obviously Wisconsin's going to rely on their offensive line. They're going to rely on their running game. I think we talked about Corey Clement a couple times. I mean, he's a guy who's going to have to be called upon to carry the ball a lot. Joel Stave's going to step up and make plays as well at quarterback. I think the question mark for Alabama is going to be quarterback, as we mentioned. Who's going to step up and make that role? And also their offensive line. They need to keep that offensive line, really strong, protect whoever's going to be quarterback, and allow that running game to get going. Because again, we know what Lane Kiffin did last year as an offensive coordinator, but I think this year will be the big key. Is with so many new faces, what can they do? What will they be able to do? They don't have Amari Cooper anymore, so he was kind of their escape valve. So it'll be interesting to see that. I think this game is going to be close, but I think Alabama wins.
I'm picking Wisconsin. This is the Big Ten momentum push forward. Everybody's gonna be talking about. No, when I look at this Alabama team, we're focused on who's going to be quarterback because that's easy to pick. But they lost a ton of talent on defense. This is an Alabama team. Yeah, I know they're loaded with a bunch of highly recruited players every year, and they just kind of replace. But it's tough to get everybody in game shape ready when you haven't been in this situation before. Wisconsin, they got the big uglies. You talked about Clement. I think Wisconsin's going to be able to run the ball. I think they're going to be able to control the ball. And I think they're going to be able to shock everybody and beat Alabama and just send everything into a flux in the first week. Number 3 team goes down.
Well, you remember, it was Wisconsin's win over Auburn in the postseason last year that Urban Meyer said they watched that game, and that inspired them to go out and beat Alabama because that kind of got the ball rolling that the Big Ten could compete with the SEC. So it'll be interesting to see maybe if Wisconsin can kind of flip that around and use that to take advantage of Alabama. But I like the Crimson Tide in this one, but I think it's going to be closer than a lot of people think.
All right, and I'm taking the Badgers, our first disagreement of 2015, which means
many more to come, I'm sure.
College football is starting. It is now what? Just over 27 hours away. Every week at Wednesday at 2 p.m. we'll be here doing College Football Now. We'll be talking about the weeks before. Also doing our picks, which I will tend to get right more often than you, and taking your questions in throughout. So follow us all season long, 2 p.m., and you can watch the replays and everything else. For Matt Murschel, I'm Brant Parsons. Thanks for watching College Football Now at OrlandoSentinel.com.